Remember the St. Louis. That is what it says on the huge sign outside of our building. I don't know if you've noticed, but a few months ago, we actually got a bigger sign than we had before. We see it when we drive by, when we enter Micah for Shabbatot and holidays. We see it all the time. Remember the St. Louis. Over the past few weeks, I have been thinking a lot about memory, what it really means to remember, and what it means to come from a people and tradition that venerates and centers remembering. In this week's Torah portion, we read, "And you shall tell your child on that day, it is because of what God did for me when I went out of Egypt." The Torah insists that we remember and that we teach our children to remember too. And memory is not a passive act, but a mandate that shapes who we are and how we live. The Hebrew word zachor, remember, appears 169 times in the Torah. And each use of zachor summons us to recall our story, our identity, and our obligations. As Sforno, the 16th century Italian commentator, teaches, telling and retelling our story is meant to shape the moral and spiritual identity of the next generation. We don't just transmit facts, we transmit meaning and urgency and the ongoing work of discovering who we are with each new day. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. Love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourself been strangers in the land of Egypt. Dozens of times, remember, remember, remember. And just in case we live through a chapter of perceived security, in case we're tempted to hoard safety for ourselves, or to dismiss our own memories as exceptional or traumas that happened years ago and won't happen again, every single week, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. Each time we raise a glass of wine and say the Kiddush to begin Shabbat, we say it out loud, remember Egypt, remember that you were given the opportunity to escape, remember that you left your place of birth in search of freedom and security for yourself, for your community, and for your children. This moment in our country's history should strike us to our core, we who are commanded to always remember. We see unjust violence by the government against our own communities. We see the government enter homes without warning, rip families apart, detain Americans with no notice, swiftly and with little recourse. Neighborhoods brace themselves in fear. Entire cities brace themselves in fear. Remember, remember, remember. Honestly, how could we forget? Burned in our collective memory are the images of hundreds of refugees aboard the SS St. Louis, actively escaping Hitler and turned away by the United States and Cuba. Instead of being offered a haven from the storm, they were sent back to Europe under the watch of Coast Guard boats patrolling that no one slipped off to freedom. And the Torah is here to tell us that this memory is not just theoretical, it's visceral. We remember the knock on the door in Egypt, Spain, Germany, and even in the United States. We remember what it feels like to be outside the gates, to be at the mercy of someone else's borders and someone else's rules. We remember the human cost of indifference. As a child of immigrants myself, these memories are wound deep in my DNA. My father, who immigrated to this country, is the child of immigrants too. His parents left Tunisia for Israel in the 1960s as the situation for Jewish communities in Tunisia and across North Africa and the Middle East became increasingly untenable. My grandparents left everything behind: homes, wealth, culture, language. And when they arrived in Israel, they were met with poverty, displacement, and new forms of discrimination. My dad came from Israel to the United States during the Gulf War in the 90s. He remembers sitting on the tarmac for hours wearing a gas mask, waiting to launch off into the next new chapter of uncertainty. Of course, the broad strokes of my family's story aren't especially unique. In fact, they're painfully common. It almost goes without saying, If not for immigration, if not for escape routes, open borders, and the countless chances to start again, many, if not most, of us Jews would not exist. During the First Crusades, Ashkenazi Jews moved to Poland. After the Spanish expulsion, Sephardic Jews dispersed throughout the Ottoman Empire and Western Europe, some even becoming the first Jews in North America. To those fleeing regimes in Central Europe and the pogroms, America's open doors offered shelter and opportunity. And as the Nazi menace grew even more deadly and America kept its doors shut, we suffered the agony of those who were left to die. So how could we forget? And yet, how can we not be crushed by the memory of it all? All we have survived, sometimes just barely. We have experienced losses so deep they cannot be absorbed within one lifetime. Unresolved trauma passed down through generations like recipes. When our story has been shaped again and again by devastating, disorienting moments of loss and exile, how do we resist becoming numb? How do we stop ourselves from normalizing what we know in our bones is wrong, from shirking away or letting fear drive our responses because the suffering feels familiar? I look to our Rosh Hashanah liturgy for answers. Rosh Hashanah is often called the day of remembrance because at the start of each new year, we are called to remember. We remember the world's creation. We remember our place within it, the story we belong to, and the obligations that story places on us. It is a day that insists that the way we carry our memories, whether with fear or clarity or with purpose, shapes who we are and who we become. And I was so moved by what I found in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy. On Rosh Hashanah, right before the second round of shofar blasts, we recite a section of verses and prayers called Zichronot, a moment devoted to memory. In this section, we read, "A messenger from another time, a stranger here in our midst, the shofar sounds remembrance. We are called to remember wherever we go that God is within us. After the flood, in the wake of destruction, Noah discovered the rainbow. Alone on a mountain, knife in his hand, Abraham heard the voice of compassion. At the end of her strength, afraid for her child, Hagar found a well in the wilderness. When we are caught in the thicket, when we feel alone or forgotten, when we stand in the depths of despair or in the aftermath of the very worst moments, the shofar sounds remembrance. It calls us to remember that wherever we go, God is with us." And then we read this next part, which is, to me, so exceptional. "The divine awakens within us a sudden awareness of your presence. This presence that remembers the covenant with great love, that causes the waters of the flood to subside, that feels kinship with all creatures, that freed the Israelites from Egypt, this presence is within us." This is what our liturgy says. This presence is within us. Again, from the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, God of remembrance, remember the covenant of our ancestors. We reaffirm it today. Remember that we are people of noble ideas. Help us attain them. Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace, bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah and Abraham's words. I have to read this again because it's so powerful. Remember the mercy of the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, and Abraham's words, "Here I am." Our tradition teaches that at the start of each new year, the presence which remembers humanity in its darkest moments, fights for liberation, and opens the path towards life, that presence, that impulse, that drive lives within each of us. And we are called to answer, required to answer in our own imperfect, trembling voices, "Here I am." Perhaps it is this presence within each of us that Irving Berlin was trying to call forward when he wrote the aspirational words of "God Bless America." A Jewish immigrant shaped by persecution, he arrived here as a child and had to change his birth name to feel safe. And in 1938, as Jews across Europe searched desperately for escape, perhaps Berlin was writing to that presence in each of us, to that part that insists on hope, on clarity, on possibility. God bless America. We bless courage and resilience. Land that I love. We bless the ability to see ourselves and our families and every human being perpetually moving between home and exile, between safety and flight. Stand beside her. Our tradition reminds us how conditional welcome can be, how long and disorienting the journey between oppression and freedom often is, and the fragility of even our most stable places of security. And guide her. We remember where we came from, not just as Jews, but as part of the tired, poor, and huddled mass that is humanity yearning to be free. We bless hope. We bless new beginnings. We fight to always leave the door more open than we found it. We let memory be a warning and a call, and we fight to widen the circle of safety. We say, here we are. We gather, we bring our presence, we march, we blow whistles, we document, and we hold accountable. We write articles, letters, and songs, and we pray, even if we are not sure what it does. And we remind those in power again and again and again that in our democracy, the government stands to protect the rights of the vulnerable, the rights of all people, the rights of the stranger. Through the night, with the light from above, I don't remember much from the day that my dad became a citizen of the United States. I was 6 years old. I have vague memories of him poring over a textbook, my mom quizzing him late into the night. I remember sitting on a carpeted floor, eating potato chips, waiting for what felt like a very long time for him to come back from somewhere. And I remember his expression when he did, a special and huge smile across his face. We waved tiny American flags we bought from the dollar store. I added an E to the end of my name so that people will pronounce it correctly. I remember him telling us. From the mountains to the prairies. After the ceremony, my family didn't celebrate in any grand way. My Baba gave us a red, white, and blue quilt that her mother had made for the bicentennial. They were also immigrants from Russia to the Midwest. To the oceans, white with foam. We sat in the backyard. The adults drank beer. Our Persian friends gave my dad a t-shirt with an American flag printed on it. We ate veggie burgers in Tahdig as the sun set. We laughed and listened to music and felt safe. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Shabbat shalom.